Ah, the richest people in the United States. Why do we really care about how much money people really make anyways? If somebody makes less money than you, then you feel superior. If people make a lot of money, we envy them. That's just how it is in this world, which is sad. But despite the saying money doesn't matter, it actually does. Money allows for freedom and safety and a better quality of life. And being attracted to wealth is a tribal desire that goes back to when we were just cave people. Men fought over being the strongest and the best, and females were attracted to males with the most power and the most resources. So it's just human nature. Let's be honest. We're also nosy. We want to know how much everybody makes. Now today we're going to look at the richest city in every single state. In order to determine that metric, we just have to look at who makes the most money in every single community, every city, every town, and we can get that number from the census. They tell us who makes the most money, so we just have to pick the one that's the richest, right? Some of these are going to be surprising and some of them will not be, but it's all going to be very interesting because we're all very nosy. We want to know who the big ballers are in this country, don't we? We have a lot of ground to cover, so we should probably get going. Here are the richest cities in every single state in America. We're going to start here in Alabama, which doesn't necessarily seem like a rich place overall, but like every state, there's some rich people somewhere here, and many of those deep-pocketed people live here in Mountain Brook, a Birmingham suburb. Here, the average household earns about $238,000 a year. That's a lot of money, considering the average Alabama family brings in about $51,000 a year. Mountain Brook has Brookwood Village, which has fancy shopping stores and cute little restaurants and boutique shopping, because, rich people need nice things to spend their money on, right? Some Alaska people have a lot of oil money, and some are natives with relatively nothing. But here in Cordova, people are doing pretty well. There's about 2,000 people here way out in the middle of nowhere along the Gulf of Alaska. Look at that view their money can buy. Wow, so lucky. I bet everyone here has a boat in that marina. The only way to get here is by boat or plane, but it's like that in many parts of Alaska. Maybe one day they can use all their money and build a road into town. Or maybe they just like being isolated. I would. Paradise Valley, Arizona is full of rich people. The average household here makes a few pennies shy of $350K a year. It's a suburb of Phoenix with about 13,000 people. There's golf courses all over the place up here. The homes here are freaking amazing. The average home here costs $2.2 million. Lots of celebs live here, including former rock stars and actors. Bruce Halley, the founder of Discount Tires, lived here. He had like $4 billion bucks. Good for you, Bruce. Now, Arkansas isn't really a super rich state overall. However, in Cave Springs, families bring in an average of $160K a year, which goes a long way in Arkansas. Like, with that kind of dough, you could pretty much buy any house in this whole state. It's up in northwest Arkansas, which is the only real nice place in the state, sort of outside of Fayetteville, which is the headquarters for Walmart, so there's likely lots of Walmart execs who pad the income stats. I mean, if you have to live in Arkansas, and you have to work for Walmart, I guess there's not a better place to put roots down. Atherton, California is not only the richest place in California, it's the richest place in the country, people. The San Francisco suburb is where a lot of tech execs and founders of companies and a lot of who's who in the Bay Area live. The average household makes about $526,000 a year, which most of us can't really relate to. I'm telling you, all the power in this country isn't based in DC where the lawmakers are, it's where the tech companies are nowadays. You could live in Atherton too if you wanted. There's nothing stopping you. As long as you can afford a $6.2 million on average home. Can you? Didn't think so. Never mind. Oh, so fancy. These ladies are so classy. You can bet you'd see a woman like this in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, which is the wealthiest place in this state. It's a Denver suburb. There's lots of rich people in various areas outside of Denver, but nobody else can say they make $417,633 every year. Is everybody in Cherry Hills Village a damn dentist or something? There's 6,000 people here. It's the kind of place where there's golf courses that host PGA events, and it's filled with people who likely have second homes in Aspen. John Elway and Peyton Manning have homes here, in case you care. Everyone kind of thinks rich when they think of Connecticut. A lot of the areas up here along the New York state line, like Darien, are where the rich banker types live. Darien ranks only 9th among the richest cities we're going to talk about, where folks bring in about $365K a year. So keep working those long hours and missing out on your kids' sporting events, you Darieners, because you have some rungs on that ladder to keep climbing up. There's a place called Townsend. It's kind of halfway between Wilmington and Dover, where a lot of rich folks live in Delaware. There's only 2,000 people here, but it's growing fast. Because if there's going to be a nice place in Delaware to live, everybody wants to go there, I suppose. It's a relatively quiet place, so you probably haven't heard much about it, and nothing really exciting happens here. There really aren't any notable people from Townsend, but Sonic Fox, this gamer dude, no doubt brings in hordes of cash playing video games. I wish I made a ton of money playing video games growing up. I could crush it on Nintendo. Florida has a bunch of rich people, but none is richer than the folks in Palm Beach, which bring in about $328,000 each on average every single year. There's about 8,000 people on this stretch of land, which is an island down here in southern Florida, right on the Atlantic. There's probably lots of people with boats here who drive 4 hours to the Bahamas, and no doubt this is the second home for people from cold states too. There's 30 billionaires who have lived on Palm Beach, including former presidents like JFK and Donald Trump.
Look at those shoes. Streetcar guys. Look at those shoes.
Is it the way they dress? You can't always tell who's rich these days. While some rich people spend more on clothes than most people make every year, the new trend is to sort of blend in. Lots of super rich people could stand in line next to you at Wegmans, and you'd never know. Georgia's wealthiest city is a place called Berkeley Lake. Of course, it's going to be a northern Atlanta suburb where practically all of Georgia's wealthy people live. It's growing super fast in this part of the state, but Berkeley Lake has only about 1,500 people. The average homes here are only about $600K, and I say only because compared to some other cities, that's actually not too bad. A lot of people here have white-collar jobs like technology and management. Hawaii's richest place probably isn't as rich as you might think. Sure, $163K a year is a lot, but it's Hawaii. You'd think maybe there was a nook here somewhere with a lot more money. This is East Honolulu, which is east of Honolulu. There's a bunch of million-dollar homes up here along the ridge of this inactive volcano.
Did you know there's no such thing as volcano insurance?
Well, that sucks, but I guess people know the risk of building a home near a volcano, Mappy. Are you wealthy enough to afford a home in Hawaii? I doubt you are. I only pay you $8 an hour.
I have old money. Here's a look at my bank account.
What the hell, Mappy? You have $17,300,017 in your bank account? Why didn't you tell me that before?
You never asked.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea Mappy was so rich. I might have to start being nicer to him now. But for now, we come to Idaho's richest place, which is the well-to-do city of Eagle, which is a Boise suburb. Lots of people from California are moving here. They just sell their $900,000 home and move up here and buy the biggest home they can find. Because here in Eagle, it's far cheaper than in many parts of California. Eagle's a super nice place where a lot of Idaho snobs live. Oh hey, rich Illinois lady. You look great. What's your secret?
Well, I take care of my figure, my face, and my teeth.
Your teeth?
Come closer and I'll show you. The best smiles start with the whitest teeth.
Wow. I don't know if everyone in Winnetka's teeth look that great, but I bet lots of them do. This is a Chicago suburb, one of many super rich areas up here in northern Illinois. It's actually the 8th richest city of all cities on this list. There's a bunch of private schools here and a lot of fancy shopping in the area. Look at this impressive list of famous people who live or lived in Winnetka. Former NFL QB turned reality show reject Jay Cutler had a place here. So did Phil Donahue. He had a really good talk show there for a long time. Remember Phil Donahue? Anywhere directly north of Indianapolis is going to have the fancy pants in Indiana. This is Zionsville, where families bring in about $184K annually. Many of them are doctors or business owners who commute into Indy every day. The population's about 28,000 and it's growing super fast here. A lot of athletes live here because there really aren't a lot of nice areas to live in the greater Indianapolis region.
I saw that Mappy showed you how much money's in our bank account. You stay away from it. That money's mine.
Actually, the bank account says Mappy, not Mappy and you. You better check yourself, woman. Bet the only reason you're with him is because he's rich.
No, it's because he has a really nice body.
Nice body? Looks like yours. Actually, exactly like yours. Nice body. If anyone has a nice body, it's me. You do have a nice body! Shut up, super gay cop. So here we are in Iowa, which has a bunch of really rich farmer types. But here in Robbins, a Cedar Rapids suburb, it's not all farmers. 96% of folks here have a high school education or higher. And 96% of this place is white, so it's not very diverse. Sure, it's nice and safe. There's not a lot to do here. What's the fun in having a lot of money if there's nowhere to spend it? This might be a real shocker. Mission Hills, Kansas is the 4th richest city we're going to talk about today. Who would have thought? People here make an average of $427,000. What the? In Kansas? It's a Kansas City suburb right on the Missouri border. $427,000. That's a lot of successful businessmen who live here, and a lot of old money too, I bet. In Mission Hills, starter homes sell for about $500,000. Older homes sell for $1 million, and an $800,000 home is torn down and rebuilt. It's a teeny little place, home to about 3,500 people, and it's just 2 square miles in size, but man, they're rich there. Indian Hills is a little enclave just north of Louisville, and they have all the money in Kentucky. People here in Jefferson County bring in a cool $245K a year here. It's a very waspy suburb, and like many of the places we've talked about so far, it's just kind of boring here. Not a lot to do in Indian Hills proper. You'd have to go to Louisville for that. And yuck. Northeast of Baton Rouge is a really nice city called Central. For Louisiana, this place is wealthy, where people bring in about $110K a year, but it's the 5th poorest of all cities we're going to talk about. But $110K a year can buy a lot of Louisiana land and a lot of LSU season tickets, I'll tell you that. Louisiana's the 4th poorest state in the nation, where people make under $50K a year. But you can have a good life here if you apply yourself. And apparently there's more nurses here in Central than any other occupation. Interesting, nurses make good money. Maine isn't known as being a really wealthy place, but it is a safe place to live. This is Cumberland, a town of 7,000 people just outside of the northern Portland suburbs. A lot of people up here just lead unassuming normal lives in cute places like this on some of Maine's windy roads. But why wouldn't they lead a normal life? I mean, they make $134K a year. That's like $65K for mom and dad. I'm not that impressed. That's not that much. But hey, for Maine it's rich, so you keep on keeping on. Seems like a nice life up here. I bet their 401Ks are doing pretty well. Who wears fancy hosiery? Probably people in Chevy Chase do. This place is loaded, pal. Like the 7th richest of all cities we're going to talk about. $383,000 a year goes a long way towards boat payments, fancy cars, and mansions like this. I bet if people in Chevy Chase were to visit Cumberland, Maine, they'd be like, oh, this is cute. The town of Chevy Chase is home to a bunch of country clubs and private schools and maids and servants. A lot of prominent politicians live here and commute into D.C. And how do politicians get so rich on a $180,000 a year salary? That, my friends, is something we could talk about in a whole other video. Massachusetts is another rich state, so you would think the richest place here would be pretty well off, and that is the case. This is Wellesley, home to a bunch of educated elite just outside of Boston. This is also home to Wellesley College, one of the most prominent and expensive places you can send your children, if you can afford it. It's about $75K a year to send your kid there, but if you're poor, you get a bunch of grants and scholarships, so I guess it's doable. But is your kid smart enough to go to Wellesley? Not likely. People in Bloomfield Hills can look down upon their Detroit area brethren. That's because they pull in just under $300,000 a year annually. This place is elite and home to the famous Cranbrook schools, which cost $46,000 a year for high school. Who can afford that? That's one way to get into Wellesley, I suppose. Bloomfield Hills is super nice and safe, but it's not for everyone. This guy says a lot of people here are fake and everyone only cares about money. Well, that's the 1% for you. What do you expect, guy? Just outside of Minneapolis is a suburb of North Oaks. There's less than 5,000 people here. This whole place is one big gated community, and everybody has an HOA. But they do have a mayor and a city government, which is really unique for a big gated community. You can get a home like this for 1.1 million smackers, and the HOA is only $113 a month. That's not that bad. The HOA part, I mean. Here we are in our poorest state, Mississippi, but the richest place here isn't very poor. I mean, it's the 11th poorest on our list, but people in Madison make about $139,000 a year, which isn't too shabby. It's a suburb of Jackson, the state capital, where there's about 25,000 people. Madison used to be where all the rich people moved who were sick of the holy roller rednecks who ran the state capital. Now it is too filled with holy roller rednecks. I mean, look at the Kroger here. It looks like a damn bank. So fancy, Madison. So fancy. There's some really nice areas in the St. Louis vicinity, believe it or don't. Many are on the western and northern fringes of the St. Louis metro area. The wealthiest is Ladue, home to 8,500 people. This is where all the doctors and lawyers live in town. $304,000 a year for each house on average goes a long way in Missouri. August Bush from Anheuser-Busch lives here. So do former athletes and CEOs of major companies. There's a lot of old money and elitism here. It's a bunch of 2-story homes with manicured yards that you know they don't mow themselves, people. Montana has a ton of closet millionaires, and it's quickly becoming a place where people out west are moving for a new start. But there's no hiding the money in Helena Northeast, a community just outside of Helena, the state capital. But for perspective, this is the 7th poorest of the richest places we're going to talk about on this list. There really isn't a lot going on up here. It's a bunch of really big homes along the hillside, way out along some dirt roads. But it sounds like a great place to me. Look at all that space. I bet the hunting's good too. Waverly, Nebraska is the poorest, richest city of every one we're going to talk about. Families here only make $92K a year annually. That's not a lot, but for them it is. Maybe that puts into perspective the type of wealth in this state. But it's Nebraska. I mean, what'd you expect? Come on. It's a small, cute community about 20 minutes outside of Lincoln. I bet a lot of people here in Waverly, Nebraska eat pork chops with fancy china.
They're crispier, but tender and juicy. The seasoning. How'd Mary get these pork chops so scrumptious?
I like pork chops.
I bet you do, Juan. But I bet you like carne asada even more, huh? Yeah, I knew it. And I bet you eat a bunch of candy too. Juan, come on. Yeah. Clearly, there's some really rich people in Nevada. But you might be surprised to hear the richest place in this state is nowhere near Las Vegas. It's Little Incline Village, way up here along the banks of Lake Tahoe, outside of Reno. They call this place Income Village. Big fancy homes with amazing views and lake access. It would be hard to find anything under $1 million here. I mean, a condo is $450K. This one's $26 million. Look at that view, people. Hanover, New Hampshire is the wealthiest place you can live in this state. It's way out in the middle of nowhere along the Vermont state line. Looks like a pretty chill place. Dartmouth College is here, which is a very elite institution. You can live here in downtown Hanover, which is a quaint New England town, or some people live way out in the forest. Bye, Hanover. Most of the wealth in New Jersey is in the north central part of the state, in places like Essex, Morris, and Somerset counties. Essex Fells is the richest of the rich, where families regularly bring in more than $400K a year. That makes this place the 5th wealthiest community of all cities we're going to cover today. There's only 2,000 people here, so it's very exclusive. This place is on every sort of list for best places to live, and an average home here is well over $1 million. You can bet there's a lot of snobs up here too. I mean, by law, there's no stores or even apartments allowed here. No townhomes, no condos, no malls, or even traffic lights. Just a bunch of rich homes in the countryside. I mean, if that's not some real NIMBYism, I don't know what is. You might think Los Alamos is the richest part of New Mexico because it's filled with a bunch of engineer types, but on paper, it's Little Corrales, a posh community way out along the hillsides in fancy North Albuquerque. $157,000 a year per household may not sound like a lot, but for New Mexico, that's like king money. There's hardly any crime up here away from the Berkey drama, and everybody says it's just a cool little tight-knit community. A lot of people who live here are leaders of various area companies, but look at this. A lot of people are just regular teachers. I guess you can lead a good life in New Mexico by just teaching. Oh, so fancy. She's so elegant, so beautiful and graceful. Ah, so distinguished and sophisticated. She must live in Scarsdale. Vaseline? Scarsdale, New York is not only the richest place in New York, it's the second richest place in the country. The average home here goes for about $1.2 million. They polled people in Scarsdale and they asked them, what do you spend all your money on? 70% fly first class, more than half have a boat, nearly half have a nanny, 45% have a fancy car, and 41% have a wine cellar. And I'd be willing to bet all have maids. There's a little place called Marvin in the far Charlotte fringes, right along the South Carolina border, where there's a ton of dough. People here earn 4 times the state average. But apparently, there's a bunch of drama in Marvin, as the residents constantly battle with the city council, which battles with one another over various notable ordinances and such. Mo money, mo problems. If you lived in San Francisco, $105,000 would get you a flea bag apartment above a homeless shelter. For North Dakota, $105,000 goes a long way. Here in Beulah, you can bet folks lead a nice, safe, quiet life. In the coal mines, a lot of the big players here work in energy, and coal's a big deal in this town way out in the middle of nowhere. They call this place the energy capital of North Dakota, you know. The village of Indian Hill, so fancy. Actually, it's called the city of the village of Indian Hill. That's so snobtastic, huh? This little village has 6,000 people way down near the Cincinnati metro area. Look at all the moolah they make here. What is going on down there? It's all rolling hills with fancy schools and big giant homes with brick driveways and big green yards. I mean, if it's good enough for Neil Armstrong, it has to be fancy. He's been to the moon, and he still picked the city of the village of Indian Hill to call home. Among all the yee-yees and rednecks around these parts, there's a lot of oil and old money in Oklahoma, the most notable of which is Nichols Hills, here in a fancy area north of Oklahoma City. There's not too many people here, only about 3,700 people. It's well known in the area for all the upscale shopping and the chic restaurants and bars and parks and golf courses. It's the kind of place where you drive around on Christmas Eve and look at all the lights. Portland sucks, but just outside of it isn't too bad, in some parts. Sherwood's a city about 12 miles southwest of Portland where all the banks are all full. Many of the people who live here are bankers and insurance reps, and there's a lot of healthcare and tech people here as well. And they just got a new high school here too, and it's the biggest school in Oregon. All that money gets what it wants, everyone. Of course, Fox Chapel is going to be the richest place in Pennsylvania. Everybody in PA knows about Fox Chapel. It's a Pittsburgh suburb. There's a lot of scratch in these parts. Families here clear $290K every single year. It's really one of the few areas in the Pittsburgh area that's not run down and grimy. This is home to a ton of old money. Many of the wealthiest and most powerful generationally connected families live here in Fox Chapel. The ketchup lady lives here, as does the former head coach of the city's football team. Rhode Island doesn't have a lot of money, and it's evident by the richest city, Kingston's placement. Families take in just over $100K every year, which ranks it as the third least rich of the richest cities we're going to talk about. The University of Rhode Island's here, so I'm sure many of the people who live here are professor types. But did you know adjunct professors only make about $10,000 a year? These part-time professors only get paid like $3,000 per course they teach. There's a lot of adjunct professors with PhDs who work at Starbucks. Just waiting for a professorship to open up can be a many years long ordeal. But they charge a fortune to learn at these places. What the hell? Isle of Palms sounds like it would be a fancy place, and it is. It's an island with a bunch of palmetto trees on it here in an exclusive area in the vicinity of Charleston. There are tons of people in Charleston with huge bank accounts, but the who's who of the Charleston area lives on Isle of Palms. You want to impress a lady in Charleston? Just tell her you have a boat parked here. She'll go home with you just to see the boat. Who cares about your bedroom? Come on now. South Dakota isn't a very exciting place, and little Brandon isn't any different. It's a Sioux Falls burb way out along the Minnesota state line. They make a pretty penny up here in no man's land, and they probably save most of it. I mean, 1 year's income here could pay for the whole house, people. That's some serious buying power. Those haircuts are so glamorous. Big hair used to be a thing in Tennessee, but now you're judged by the size of your paycheck, sadly. And nobody has a bigger paycheck than the folks in Forest Hills, a Nashville suburb. I know the people in Belmead next door are looking over their fences like, WTF, how are they richer than us? They just are, Belmeadians. They just are. Get up earlier. I don't know. Out of all of the outrageous, out-of-this-world money that people have in Texas, it's a place you probably haven't heard of that has the most of it. It's Little Hunters Creek Village, a place with only 4,300 people. What a teeny little city. It's just outside of Houston. Hunters Creek Village has its own school district for 4,300 people. If that's not exclusive. There's a lot of oil money here. Look at this place for sale. It's called the Romanov Estate. It has a moat around it, but you have to email them to find out how much it costs. I bet they make you show a printout of your bank account before you can even make an appointment. 1% of people in Hunters Creek Village live in poverty. It's probably everybody's landscapers. Mapleton, Utah probably doesn't have any mansions with moats around them, but they're doing just fine for themselves. Mapleton's part of the exploding area outside the Salt Lake City metro area down along the Wasatch Front near Provo. One person said Mapleton's like a Disney princess movie with birds and deer and flowers everywhere. Aw. Lots of people are moving to Utah. Right now, homes are $550,000, but that's not going to last long. You could say folks in Essex Junction are wealthy, but they're really not. For Vermont, a little less than 100K is wealthy, but with all the taxes you have to pay, that goes fast. Essex Junction is a smallish place with 11,000 people just outside of Burlington. It's really safe here, and there's great schools. Bye, Essex Junction. Anywhere near the DC metro area in Northern Virginia is going to have the most rich people. I was just in Falls Church not too long ago, and it's as fancy as advertised. Like Chevy Chase, a lot of the mommies and daddies here work at the nation's capital as lobbyists and contractors and the like. Working for the government doesn't always pay, but it does if you have connections, and lots of people in Falls Church are clearly well connected when you look at their bank accounts and their homes. You wouldn't want to live in Seattle these days with all the crap going on there. So all the rich people live across the bridge from Lake Washington. Just north of Bellevue is a teeny little city called Clyde Hill, where people bring in a strong $350K annually. Many are technology elites. If big fancy yards is an indication of wealth, then Clyde Hill has it going on. This small city ranks 10th in the U.S. for most landscapers hired per capita. And as you can see, they're doing a great job for their bosses. There's a little bit of moolah here in West Virginia. Bridgeport has a lot of it. It's way out on I-79, about an hour from Morgantown. There's actually quite a bit going on economically way out here in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. They're building a lot of fancy housing communities here, and Lockheed Martin, and some big hospitals, and the FBI, and of course, there's some big energy companies with a presence here. Some good jobs in rural West Virginia there are. Milwaukee has some really, really, really bad areas and some really nice areas. North of Milwaukee along the lake is fancy, but the wealthiest people in the whole state live out here in Merton, a village of 3,500 people. Look at this really fancy website they have. So charming, Village of Merton. So charming. And finally, Wyoming. Of all the places the elite can call home here, it's going to be Jackson where the real money is. It's a town in Wyoming's Jackson Hole Valley with a bunch of ski towns nearby and big fancy second homes. There's about 10,000 people here, and most don't have a care in the world. You get to live in nature and away from the crime and the BS. The average home is $1.7 million, so you better have some deep pockets to be able to afford to live here. But you get what you pay for. I mean, look at the place. Rich indeed. Okay, so that's it. Our look at the richest cities in every single state. The places where people have good lives, and in many cases, great lives. Money doesn't buy everything, but it buys this, and this is pretty cool, I have to say. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great! You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.